take a look at the final outing for the 7th Doctor for the Big Finish main range for this year, as I take a look at the final episode from the 7th Doctor 2017 Mel and Ace trilogy in the Silurian Candidate, written by Matthew J Elliot. Now, this is the first of 2 Big Finish main range releases for September. It's just normally the way that dates work that we end up with 1 month with at least 2 Big Finish main range releases. The next one is going to be Time in Office, which is a one-off 5th Doctor story. However, this one is the nice wrap-up story for the 2017 trilogy with the 7th Doctor, and features the return of the classic Silurians, which I didn't quite realise is in fact quite a big deal, because we did of course have previously this year unit assembled with the new series Silurians. However, we've not had a proper classic series Silurian story in quite a long time. I do believe the previous one that we in fact had was Blood Tide, a 6th Doctor story, and I do believe the 1 to 50 range, so quite a long time ago, literally when I was about 3 years old. So yeah, it's quite a big deal, to be honest. It's one of which I expected to have a little bit more of a big deal about over social media and things. Yeah, people don't seem to have sort of had this one on the radar, so it's nice to see that the Silurians have returned in sort of full form. Although they were in the unit assemble box set, I thought they could have had a little bit more to do, and in this one we've got definitely that. In the description below I will leave the link to go and buy this release from Big Finish website. It's out now for $14.99 for the physical release and $12.99 for the MP3 download, and if you're subscribed to the Big Finish newsletter, you can in fact get the first episode of this release for in fact free, so that's good, isn't it? So if you'd like to listen to that one, then you say maybe like the story, then you can go and buy the rest of it, and then you can have a lovely Silurian story to add to your collection. But yeah, once again with this one, we have the same traits that I've mentioned in the previous review of the 7th Doctor, Mel and Ace, because I've been kind of loving the relationship that they've had, although the 7th Doctor and Ace seem to be going through a little bit of a bumpy patch at the moment to an extent, and the same with Mel and Ace, to be honest. Their relationship that they have is incredibly unusual, because I wouldn't exactly say that they like each other, but they do at the same time. It's a very odd one. It's a very odd TARDIS team at the moment. The traits that they do have together and the characteristics that they have do seem to still bounce off each other. So yeah, I do believe that this is Matthew J Elliot's 3rd contribution to the Big Finish main range. I think the first one was in fact about a year ago from this month, maybe just over a year or something like that, with the 7th Doctor story, once again the maker of Demons, which I do think is probably one of the weakest of his runs so far. The next one was Zoltis, which was a release that I did previously review this year, maybe one of the March releases of the Big Finish main range, I think, if I can remember rightly. But yeah, that was a pretty good one. I went into it not really knowing much whatsoever, and then I came out the other side very much enjoying it. And then in this one, I didn't in fact ring a bell until I actually started listening to this one that was written by Matthew J Elliot, and all of a sudden references started coming in, and it was one of those ones that, once again, I really enjoyed it for what it was. And I think that Matthew J Elliot is slowly creeping up on the list of one of the Big Finish writers, because I'm getting more and more respect for him the more that his releases progress in the series, because I think that the more he writes for them, I think the more comfortable he gets, and the more that he gets to do different things. I have sort of a feeling that this episode is something that he's had in mind for quite a long time, and when he approached Big Finish and did the previous stories, this was the one that he was aiming up to and his original idea to start with, because with it having the return of the Silurians and something quite big and grand scale, it just seems a little bit like that way. So briefly moving on to the characters for this release now, starting off with the 7th Doctor, of course Sylvester McCoy. The same thing applies for the previous releases of the Blood Furnace and the High Price of Parking, where we have this rather really nice version of the 7th Doctor, where you have that mix of a very comedic Doctor and that serious side as well. Very much in this one we have a little bit more of that serious side than the fun happy side, and I really do like that, because I think that suits the scenario. We have this thing that the 7th Doctor needs to do. He's changed the course of the TARDIS from previously needing to go somewhere else and deal with something that he's been meaning to do for a very long time. Ace and Mel are sort of a little bit confused by this. He seems to be acting very mysterious, and we don't really know what happens and what he wants to do until the later half of the story. I think that just having this almost checking up on previous things that he's been meaning to do for quite a while is quite a nice format, something which the Doctor does tend to do quite a lot. But yeah, we do have this mysterious side of the 7th Doctor, a rather angry side of him as well, to be honest. Very early on in the story we are confronted with a situation where a character does die, and they just sort of go for the opportunity to leave this dead person or this suffering person to die, where the dinosaurs just sort of mauled him. Yes, the dinosaurs in this one, because they have other things to do, and I think that definitely the companions for this one have a lot to adjust to. There's a little bit of conflict between the 7th Doctor and Ace as well in the later half of the story, where Ace decides to literally lock the Doctors somewhere so she can go off and do her own things. Yeah, it is, as I say, a very odd relationship for this one, but a very challenging one at the same time. Again, it is nice to see that Mel also has something to do in this one. Once again, Bonnie Langford did a really good job in this story. I do seem to really like Mel in this one. In fact, she has a little bit more to do once once again. She has a few scenes with a computer, harking back to what her actual job traits are in the TV show that we've never in fact seen, so once again a running thing from the previous releases that I've reviewed as well. And Sophie Aldred as Ace, once again, she's just stepped back into that role incredibly easily. She's really good once again with the 7th Doctor, a few scenes of her bouncing off each other, and as I say, that challenge that I referenced to a little bit earlier. I think on to other notable mentions as well, very briefly. We do have Fiona Sheehan as Ruth Dexter. She also plays somebody else in the cast as well. I think that she was a really good character, a very strong female, one of those ones that you only get to know for that story, and you sort of get to know enough about them to sort of care about them to an extent. I think that she was a very nice character, as I say, strong female, so that was quite interesting and a little bit different for that classic period style of Doctor Who. And then the other person that I would like to give a little bit of credit to is also Nicholas Asbury, or Asbury, don't know how to say his second name, but yeah, he played Chairman Bart Falco, who I will get onto him in a little bit because his idea in the story and his contribution to the story is a very odd one. It's something where he's sort of used by the Silurians to an extent, and he is a little bit of that rather unusual odd dictator. And I think that although he was meant to be playing someone that you don't really like very much, I think that in this one he definitely had something to contribute, and for me, he was definitely one of the standout members of the cast. Moving on to the storyline for this one now, it is one of those ones I would expect to see New Who once again. However, it still has those classic emotions in there because it starts off as something else. It almost starts off as a 3rd Doctor story. The Doctor stumbles across some Silurians. However, all of a sudden, at the very start of part 3, we end up going to a little bit of a bigger, more political scale, a little bit more current affairs style of scale, where we have the Silurians literally intersecting into sort of human society and influencing what is going on in current affairs, current issues, to try and get the Earth back, of course, to its previous state, where they were controlling it and the humans were nowhere to be seen. So I think that the idea for this one, it reminded me a little bit of a Netflix show, to be quite honest. It reminded me of something that you would very much see on 21st century TV. I think that this very easily could in fact be sort of changed into a TV story. This wouldn't look out of place. I could imagine this with the Jodie Whittaker Doctor as well. Something to this big sort of almost current affair scale. And the reason why I refer to it as a current affair scale is basically, without going into some of the details too much, we have somebody who is, as I say, this Falcon guy that I got into previously, where he's a little bit of a nutter to an extent. He's a little bit one of those ones that has his finger on the red button. He's got access to nuclear weapons and he's going to blow everybody up. And he's a little bit of a maniac. He thinks he's doing the right thing. He's very much got that idea of power. He wants power. He's a very loud speaker. He's a loudmouth. So naturally, when people see that this person is projecting a loud voice, they think that naturally he's the one that knows what he's doing. Can you guess what I'm referring to relating to current affairs recently? We basically have these two fractions, the west side and the east side, and both of them have a leader where you could probably give them both nuclear weapons and then eventually they're both going to get angry and blow absolutely everybody up. It's very unusual. It's where Doctor Who literally meets those current affairs. It is very relatable at the same time. However, using that idea of the Silurians basically tweaking the very simple minds of the human race to go and blow everybody up, so the Silurians can then hide away in their little underground village or whatever, their underground cities, and then eventually, when our horrible world has now all been blown up and everything's been destroyed, the Silurians can come back up and then habit it once again, be the supreme beings of the planet Earth. And I think that that's the thing with the Silurians. You can't really do them that much. So to an extent, as I've said, that the Big Finish haven't really done much with them in the past, and that is solely because once you've done the Silurians once, you can't really introduce many new things to them. Basically, their idea, their aim. We've had one of those episodes such as the first ever one, Doctor Who and the Silurians, where we had them literally taking over, thinking that they need to rule the Earth once more. Then the next time we see them again, they want to rule the Earth again. Then in Series 5 of the 11th Doctor, they wanted to take over the Earth. And in this one, they want to take over the Earth. There's absolutely no variation in the plot whatsoever. However, the elements and the factors that are applied are the ones that make it different. And my major concern, not for this story, but in fact for the future, because we already know that with Chris Chibnall, he's wrote, of course, the Silurian two-parter in Series 5 and Dinosaurs in a Spaceship, which also had a little bit of a reference to the Silurians as well. I think that the likelihood of the Silurians returning in Series 11 or Series 12 is probably quite high. And I'm just hoping that Chris Chibnall may be able to tweak them to an extent to introduce something to them that is a little bit different, as opposed to something like Madame Vastra that defeats the objective completely. But yeah, with this one, I think that it's a good way to actually have one of those plots that there's absolutely nothing nothing saying that parts of this is not original whatsoever. However, the things that Matthew J Elliot applied to it, the idea of nuclear weapons, that threat that we've got going on with these two parties together, it's really large scale and something that I thoroughly enjoyed for this one. And to be quite honest, it might be one of the standout releases for this year, because it gets Doctor Who, gets current affairs, puts them both together, and creates a really fun but tense story at the same time. Considering that this is set in the future, you do literally think, hang on, are these leaders about to blow each other up because the Silurians are there, literally being string puppets and ruling everybody and they don't even know? Although, as I said, the 7th Doctor has been toned down in some of those comedic factors that he normally has in certain stories, in this one we are introduced to a character, or some characters, called the Carlas, which are robotic female robots, pretty much, where they go around being servants, being average robots. So they do allow for some rather light relief moments that apply some funny moments to some serious situations, which is nice to see. And sort of to an extent, for me, they sort of resemble those people that don't really know what's going on in current affairs and sort of just sit back and relax and not have any emotions about it. And that's the thing with the Carlas, they don't have any emotion, not really very much understanding beyond their coding, and that's something very nice for this one. And a similar thing with the previous Matthew J Elliot stories as well, is that this is packed with references. We have all different ones to say the key to time in this one, the Black Guardian. Even though it's not relevant to the story, we just have the 7th Doctor randomly blurting things out to different references to certain parts of his past to an extent. And for those people that know what is being said, it's just a nice little thing. We even have a moment which I was sort of debated on mentioning in this review, but it's a nice little nod that I just found really intriguing, that we have the Doctor, he gets sort of knocked out to an extent, or at least he's unconscious, and he wakes up and he says something just very side-handedly, saying that it's really odd. I had a little bit of a moment where a man with ringlets was sort of holding out his hand saying, "Come on, Seven, your time has come." And of course that is a reference to the 8th Doctor, or it might just be a coincidence, considering the 8th Doctor does also have ringlets to an extent at the same time. It's just a nice little thing that doesn't exactly mean anything at all, but it's just odd thinking that the Doctor gets knocked out and he has almost a vision or a hallucination of his next self, his next incarnation, sort of coaxing him on to an extent. Yeah, it's a very odd thing, as I say, that you could very easily literally just shrug off to an extent, but just a nice little nod that once again adds a level to the story that does add a little bit more enjoyment. So I do really like that, and I hope that when Matthew J Elliot continues with Doctor Who, we'll see more of that in the future. When I reviewed the first ever episode that Matthew J Elliot written, The Maker of Demons, I can remember saying that it was a decent story. However, it didn't really go above and beyond to do anything completely different. However, the detailing behind it, the tailoring to the aliens and their landscapes and the way that they live, was really, really impressive. And the way that we had that continuation in Zoltus as well, where we had a lot of different tailoring to the different people that we had, making it feel very alien, very extraterrestrial. In this one, we just have that idea of Matthew J Elliot going, this is what I wanted to do. Or as I said, that's how I feel with this one. This is the main aim that I had. This is what I want to bring to Doctor Who. And this is definitely probably one of, well, if not his best script so far. As I say, I really did enjoy it. I think it's one of those ones that is a highlight for this year in the Big Finish main range. And it passed quite quickly as well, considering it's one of those ones that is a 2-hour story. So yeah, and the fact that the Silurians are back, it's just a nice little nod. The way that they've done the voices as well and recreated the audio is really good. I may go back and listen to Blood Tide at some point as well, because I've heard a few rather grim and controversial things about that one, but in the 1 to 50 range, I do believe. So what one of those stories isn't grim and controversial at the same time? But it's in fact one of those ones that I went into thinking, yeah, it's going to be a Silurian story, but came out the other side actually thoroughly enjoying it. So for this one, if you've enjoyed the previous releases from the 2017 7th Doctor trilogy, then I highly recommend this one as well. And if you just want to pick up a random story from the 7th Doctor era with a classic villain in that you already know about, then definitely I would recommend this one, especially if you're a 7th Doctor fan and a Silurian fan. That's really it for this Big Finish main range release. I guess I'll see you all in the next Big Finish review, which will probably be either Time in Office or maybe the Bernie Summerfield box set or something like that. But yes, I will see you all whenever that may be. Bye for now.